Hello, everybody. So, today I wanted to let you know that Linux might be making a change to the kernel that would affect some of you that happen to be running Linux on your Mac computer. So I wanted to let you know about this change so that you could be aware of it. And I found this article on two different websites, and both of them sharing almost the same information. So I wanted to share both of those with you so that you would be aware of it. So it appears that Linux might be dropping the Apple HFS and HFS Plus file system kernel driver support. Now, I found this article on Linux storage, and this might be something that's going to impact a lot of you, especially if you happen to be running Linux on your Mac computer. I know I run it on a couple of mine because there's the possibility that was raised that the mainline Linux kernel might remove its file system kernel drivers for Apple HFS and HFS Plus this year. Now, while Apple no longer supports the HFS on the latest versions of macOS itself, and in prior releases was read-only support since macOS 10.6 for HFS itself, the newer HFS Plus file system does continue to be supported by Apple. Now, Linux support for HFS has been poor and ill maintained, and it looks like the kernel drivers could be on their way out. Now, prominent Linux kernel developer Christian Brauner of Microsoft has raised the possibility of removing the HFS and HFS Plus kernel drivers this year. And Brauner posted it today that let's try and remove the hashtag HFS and hashtag HFS Plus by the end of 2025. They have been orphaned since 2014 and are turning into a maintenance burden. And it does make sense with them being orphaned for more than a decade and Apple not even supporting the original HFS on macOS 10.15 and newer. Now, for those wanting to access HFS file systems from Linux, there does exist the HFS Fuse driver support for leveraging those file systems in the user space. But it's not going to allow you to do it while you're in the setup of Linux. You would have to do it after you already have your Linux distro installed on your computer. Now, the issue is raised that some Linux distributions do rely on the HFS Plus driver for installing on Intel based Macs where HFS can be used as the EFI system partition or ESP. And we'll see what solution comes about there, or if it's decided to only remove the original HFS and not the HFS Plus kernel driver support. And in any event, we'll see what comes about and if anyone bothers to step up to maintain the HFS Linux driver code. Now, my hope is that even if they decide to get rid of the HFS, that they keep the HFS Plus just because the newer Intel Macs can still use the HFS Plus, and that would allow them to still dual boot, and you would still be able to read those partitions when you're in Linux without having to go and install the HFS Fuse driver just to be able to read those partitions. Now, the other article I found was basically the same thing, but it did have a little bit more information because it said that the HFS actually goes back to September 17th of 1985. And if you'll notice, it was for Mac OS Standard and Mac OS Extended, hence the HFS and HFS Plus. And then they actually, during the development of Mac OS 10, 10.6 Snow Leopard, which was released in August 28th of 2009, Apple decided to stop all support for read and write of HFS and HFS Plus file systems, making users unable to write to any file, but they could still read from such volumes. And in macOS Catalina, they finally removed the file system support from the kernel, and making it impossible to use disks that are still formatted with those file systems. But that would still be okay because your Linux computer could still read them. But it looks like that may not be happening. We may have to go and boot it up in a virtual machine, and it have to be an older version of a Linux kernel or an older Mac OS version so that you can still read those HFS and HFS plus partitions. But I'm hoping that somebody will step up and at least keep the HFS Plus, because if anything, the HFS Plus would be the only thing that people would still have lying around. Hopefully, everybody is not using HFS anymore because it's such an old format. I mean, going back to 1985, if you still are using the HFS from 1985, hopefully you still have a computer that can run it and you could still read that information. And then you could even put it on a CD or a floppy disk or get it in some other format so that you could get it onto a newer machine. But let's just hope that if Microsoft does happen to go ahead and decide to push to remove the HFS and HFS Plus by the end of 2025, that somebody's going to step up and help with the HFS Plus after the fact. And also, if you happen to still be using those file systems after the support ending period, there is also a chance that you could use those file systems again through the user space file systems, except that you won't have the same experience, including the lack of support of writing two files for HFS Plus. But even if you could just get the files off of those partitions and you could get them off of those drives, that would allow you to get that information onto a newer drive with a newer partition so that you would be able to read and write to them on Linux, on Mac, and even on Windows. So my hope is that we'll be able to continue to read and write to them on Linux, at least for a while, so that everybody that needs to get the information off of HFS and HFS Plus would have the opportunity to do it. So I hope that was helpful and also interesting to know that we might be needing to make some changes to our computers if you happen to still be running a Mac that has HFS or HFS Plus, and you would also like to be able to run Linux on it. You may need to make a change to that partition so that you can still read it with Linux. But if you do need my help and you'd like me to go into more depth about this, please let me know down below in the comments, and I will do my best to get back to you and help you with whatever you may need. And if there's a video, topic, article, anything that you'd like me to make a video on, please let me know that down below in the comments as well, and I will do my best to create that video for you. And if you found this helpful and you'd like to support this channel, I've included a link where you can buy me a cup of coffee if you'd like to. And as always, because you all do such a great job, if you can, hit that like and subscribe button so I can keep putting up more great content like, did you know that Linux might be stopping support for HFS and HFS Plus by the end of 2025? And I'll be more than happy to keep putting up all this great content for you all. Thanks so much, everybody. I really appreciate you all. I hope you have a great day. Take care. God bless. And I'll see you all next time. Bye.